Greetings from the cosmic horrors. The stars are right once again, and the great old ones are allowing us to talk about for 30 minutes. H.P. Lovecraft, the horror writer, is a genre unto himself. I'm your cosmic host, Mark Griffin, executor of the Lovecraft Estate on Yaga, joined in by two from Material World, David Guffey, a professor at Miss Matonic University, and Richard Wilson, who wants to point out that last month's episode was 44 minutes long and warns us we are pulling a bait and switch on the listeners. When Lovecraft was 7, his mother, Susie, saw him reading The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. She confiscated the book out of concern the gruesomeness of the story about a mad scientist creating weird animal-human hybrids would be too much for young Lovecraft's nerves. So that might have been the reason why he read so little of Wells as a child. During his youth, he didn't even read The Time Machine or even War of the Worlds. He did read one of his lesser-known stories, Dream of Armageddon. It was about a dreamer witnessing not only the end of the world, but also his own life, and somehow living on. Lovecraft described it as pretty good. Wells never did achieve enough atmosphere to give me a real emotional reaction, no matter how vivid his events he relates, Lovecraft added. Herbert George Wells, if you're unfamiliar with him, was an English writer who lived from 1866 to 1946, best known for writing science fiction. In fact, he is regarded as one of the fathers of science fiction. At the time he was writing, his fiction was regarded as scientific romances. Today we think of romances as meaning a love story, but back then, romance was defined as a prose narrative, treating imaginative characters involved in events remote in time or place, and usually heroic, adventurous, or mysterious. Unlike most authors, Wells was an overnight success with the publishing of his first novel, Time Machine, which he had written before as a short story, Chronic Argonauts. And every book he wrote afterwards was also a success. He even made it to the cover of Time magazine. Before he died, over 100 books by him were printed. War of the Worlds, first serialized in 1897, experienced a resurgence in popularity when Orson Welles, no relation, adapted into a radio drama for the Halloween season of 1938. At first, H.G. Wells distanced himself from the radio drama, saying it was a contract violation because the broadcast was clearly supposed to be fiction and not news. But he calmed down and later thanked Orson Welles for increasing sales for one of his more obscure titles. It could not have been too obscure because the novel has never been out of print. In fact, none of his major works have ever been out of print. That doesn't mean he's always been popular. George Orwell, a different Well here, regarded him as a shallow, inadequate thinker. Lovecraft himself became dismissive of the author of scientific romances. H.G. Wells is a ticklish question on my literary scales. I can't derive a really supernatural thrill from matter, which keeps my mental wheels turning so briskly, and yet when I think of some of the things in retrospect, supplying my own filter of imaginative color, I am reduced to doubt. He also said, as of Wells, he is fragrantly uneven. He does good things, but trades shamelessly on his reputation and peddles more abominable drivel and hack stuff. Because of the youthful members of his circle of friends, especially August Derleth and Vernon Shea, Lovecraft in his 30s picked up Wells' books again, reading the ones he missed. The change of opinion is noticeable. One of the first William books he read as an adult was War of the Worlds. Before reading it, he wrote, I never read Wells' War of the Worlds, though I mean to sometime. His tales to me lack a certain imaginative charm. Their fantasy is too calculated and scientific. An undercurrent of social satire impairs their convincingness. Afterwards, he wrote, speaking of the cosmic, I just read Wells' War of the Worlds for the first time in Amazing Stories and deemed it the best thing of H.G.'s in which I've ever seen. He really visualizes his situations and does them justice. The tale is obviously the prototype of sources of inferior imitations. He continued reading the works of Wells and described The Time Machine as thoroughly entertaining in every detail. Some believe this story was the basis for Lovecraft's Shadow of Time. Lovecraft scholar S.T. Josie doesn't see the evidence for that. Wells is included in 2 essays by Lovecraft. In some notes on interplanetary fiction, Lovecraft laments the general low quality of pulp science fiction, but looks to such writers as Wells to raise the aesthetic level of the field. Wells gets mentioned in supernatural horror and literature, which appeared in an issue of the Recluse fanzine in 1927. A copy of the Recluse was sent to Wells, and is unknown if he read it or what he might have thought about it. Lovecraft just didn't read his science fiction, he read his nonfiction as well, especially his trilogy on life, Outline of History, which chronicles the history of the world from the creation of the earth to the First World War, Work, Wealth, and Happiness of Mankind, which covers the issues of economics and, most importantly, science of life. Science of Life was co-written with evolutionary biologist Julian Huxley and his son G.P. Wells, and was printed as a 3-volume set starting in 1929 to introduce the general public to biology. Lovecraft wanted to read these books but couldn't afford them. One could never do one volume over 12,000 pages justice within the time limits imposed by the public library, he wrote. His friend Vernon Shea loaned him his copy, and the series of books changed him remarkably. Eat Pool, what a book! It is by all odds the greatest exposition of biological knowledge which I have ever seen. A titanic, vital panorama of scope, clearness, accuracy, simplicity, coherency, proportionality, and impartiality exceeding the best of previous efforts in the same line. No question but that good old HG is a master outliner of all. Science of Life also addressed the myth of the Aryan race, a concept Lovecraft had embraced for most of his life. First, there is no such thing as an Aryan race, the book stated. There are only groups of people of various stock who speak languages of the Aryan type. Wells was a socialist who envisioned a perfect world through science and technology. He envisioned utopian Earth, but did warn of what would happen if we didn't tame our warlike nature, such as he did in the shape of things to come. He accurately predicted the Second World War would occur. George Orwell condemns Wells, but because he belonged to the 19th century, to a non-military nation and class, he could not grasp the tremendous strength of the old world, which was symbolized in his mind of fox-hunting Tories. He was and still is quite incapable of understanding that nationalism, religious bigotry, and feudal loyalty are far more powerful forces than what he himself would describe as sanity. Basically, Orwell was calling Wells naive. Lovecraft was wavering between Wells's utopian socialism and, of all people, Hitler's fascism. After reading his Science of Life and other factors, Lovecraft came to renounce Nazism and became a supporter of FDR's New Deal. In many ways, H.G. Wells saved Lovecraft's soul, but it's a shame that it came so late in his life. Lovecraft would die in 2 years. If he lived longer, he might become truly reformed. While still alive, our author of the half hour read Science of Life repeatedly. He talked about returning it to Vernon Shea, but as far as I can determine, he never did. All right, David and Richard, our Lovecraftian word of the month is scientifiction. This is a term Lovecraft used to describe the works of H.G. Wells. What is it?
You said the word was fiction or scientific?
Scientific.
Scientifiction.
Scientific fiction, then?
Is it a compound word, combining science and fiction?
It was his phrasing for science fiction. It was first coined by Hugo Gernsback, the founder and editor of Amazing Stories, who was also the Hugo Awards named after. And it was a contraction of scientific fiction for him.
Okay.
Yeah. And Gernsback defined it in the first issue of Amazing Stories in 1926. And as you can probably tell, the word never caught on. And
obviously,
yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue that well. You know, science fiction has a much better flow to it.
As trying to create some kind of handy compound word, but it's, like you said, kind of clunky.
Yeah, you know, it doesn't sound as good. And as far as I know, they're the only two people ever used that word. And our Lovecraftian creatures of the month are the deep ones. So who are they?
Well, they're the frog-like inhabitants of Innsmouth, right?
Yeah. Anything else about them?
Are we counting Dagon, Father Dagon, and Mother Hydra as deep ones, or are the deep ones really just kind of like, again, the spawn and the hybrids, you know, of the?
They are.
According
to some of the sources that came, according to the sources I read, they worship Father Dagon and Mother Hydra. So I don't know if they would be, they'd be considered deep ones, but just like, you know, they're aquatic deities that they worshipped.
Okay. That's why I was trying to see where we were drawing the line on them.
Yeah, I guess most of them just kind of consider the creatures themselves. Okay. You know, it's like as the deep ones. They don't go as far as, you know. I never heard Father Dagon ever referred to as a deep one.
Okay. Well, I can buy that. I think you're right. He's gigantic, right? He's an enormous god that lives under the ocean, right?
Yeah, that's basically we call like Lovecraft's interpretation of him. He's a
Okay.
he's a he is a real like deity that was worshipped, like long, long, long ago. So he's like
So in the movie Underwater, are those deep ones? And is that Father Dagon at the end, or is it Cthulhu?
that was
I
supposed
wonder
to be
if
Cthulhu.
probably yeah, they're trying to obviously lean into it being Cthulhu. I think what your interpretation sounds a little bit, more in line with Lovecraftian in terms of that Dagon would, be then again the god they're rallying around, and that those are, the deep ones were the ones that were foreshadowing, his appearance before that.
I could go with that.
It seems like most of the stories I've come across about the deep ones, kind of done by other people, they almost kind of like skip Dagon and just go straight to Cthulhu. Like, they're really more of like, followers of Cthulhu, than a Dagon.
That's why I wondered if, they were considered, the two of them, Dagon and Hydra, were considered in the same class, if you will, as Cthulhu, or if they were kind of a level down, and if that was the case, where they fell between, say again, the deep one denizens, and then the likes of, your Cthulhu's, your Yog-Sothoths and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, I don't know that it's explicitly stated in The Shadow over Innsmouth about what they're doing, but at the end, he's talking about he'll worship forever underwater. And is he talking about Dagon, or is he talking about going to Relia and worshiping Cthulhu?
Yeah, and they're also supposed to specialize in making jewelry out of a secret alloy that has been described as a platinum, silver, and gold. And somewhere near Innsmouth, there's an underwater city that they usually live in called Younghof Nilai. And there's a Norwegian band called EOD that did an electronic dance song with that title.
As we can continue our deep dive into Lovecraftian themed metal and other music.
Yeah, that's true.
We could probably do a spin-off series of just strictly, Lovecraftian metal,
Music themed podcast. It's just all the various Lovecraft themed bands.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. They first appeared in the Vela Shadow over Innsmouth, which was printed in 1931, or written. They're said to be hinted in the short story Dagon, which was written in 1917. There's a fan site that I came across, fandom site, that says that all the hybrids come from a female deep one and a male human. It is a safety measure for the fact that both possess a limiting growth gene for their own species. And I've never come across that interpretation in any type of Lovecraft story, about that.
I haven't either. Yeah, and then well, again, this isn't Lovecraft. This is Alan Moore and Providence. It was the other way around. As far as it was the male, was the deep one, and then they're going after the human females. So anyway,
maybe that's why that child was more special than the others. That. And many, if not all, the citizens of Innsmouth are hybrids. Some of them are more fish, frog than the human. The fandom site continued that when the hybrids become too obviously non-human, they go into seclusion and hiding in abandoned buildings until fully capable of living solely underwater. The rate of progression varies for each individual. However, it normally does not reach completion until human middle age. Once transformation is complete, they're also functionally immortal. And I don't know if were the deep ones ever considered immortal? Is it just?
I think so, yeah. I think that's at least implied, if not outright stated. Because he'll live underwater and worship forever and ever, or whatever it says at the end of The Shadow over Innsmouth.
I always kind of got a sense, that raid, when that comes close to the end of Shadow over Innsmouth, the government agents that, that they were, I guess that they had a big fight out, with them. And I guess I always kind of assumed that some of the deep ones were killed in that.
Oh, I assumed they could be killed, but maybe what they're saying is
right.
They just don't age.
They're not going to die of old age, but they could still be killed by external forces.
Yeah. And I like this one sentence I had on the fandom site says, apart from the physical change, they feel a scorn for humanity and an affinity for non-Euclidean artwork of the Deep One race, an increasing powerful desire to abandon the human world and to go to Yohav Nilai. And one of the notable citizens that's appeared in some of the stories was Azrith Wade, who was in The Thing on the Doorstep. It was like one of the other, I guess, Innsmouth stories, even though Innsmouth wasn't quite as prominent, but several people were from there. And Zadok Allen, who is presumed to be one of the few humans who lives in Innsmouth. And if you get him drunk, he'll tell you a lot of interesting stories. And the Deep Ones and their hybrids have appeared in a good number of movies. And like we were mentioning, Underwater and Stuart Gordon's Dagon, which is I found a very entertaining movie. I like that one. And we did talk about last month the movie The Deep Ones, which we decided was probably best to avoid. And then there's
no into that one yet.
Yeah. And The Creatures in the Black Lagoon could be called a deep one, but he was not inspired by Lovecraft. Producer William Allen had heard of the myths of half fish, half human creatures in the Amazon River. And with elements of Beauty and the Beast and King Kong, Allen worked into a story originally titled The Sea Monster. And Guillermo del Toro made his own version of The Creature of the Black Lagoon called Shape of the Water, in which the gill man and the girl get together in the end. Don't have those pesky humans, ruining everything for them. And while that may some people think of Hellboy, which Del Toro also adapted in the movies. And you have Abe Sapien, who is definitely could be related to Gilman and the Deep Ones. And the Deep Ones also appear in the game Alone in the Dark, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The Murdochs in the game Warcraft 3, Reign as Chaos, are supposed to be inspired by the Deep Ones. Another video game, Etrian Odyssey 3, players fend off Deep Ones who are determined to free the abysmal god, who is more or less Cthulhu. Mm-hmm. And the plot to Elder Scrolls 4, Oblivion, borrows heavily from Shadow over Innsmouth. The Deep Ones get mentioned, but they're never seen. They are worshipped by the people of Hekdirt. In fact, the title of that little quest they go through is called Shadow over Hekdirt.
There's a horror movie, a more relatively recent one called Cold Skin, that very much plays up the Deep Ones, as far as those are the ones that Ray Stevenson's lighthouse keeper is fending off, that keep coming after him every night, that are trying to basically, he's spending the soul man on the, manning the lighthouse, trying to, deal with this endless army of Deep Ones that are coming up out of the water.
It's called Cold Skin.
Cold Skin? Or is that on any of the
it's on
streaming services?
It's on one of the 100 streaming services which we watched it. And there's another video too. It's the one I played a demo of a number of months back called The Shore. And most of your initial enemies that you face are the deep ones that come out of the water at the shore, with the end of the demo being that you summon Cthulhu. I'm not sure as far as in the rest of the game, as far as the full game's release, how much of a role they have in that, but they're very much and clearly intended to be, here's the Deep Ones, and then your end boss is Cthulhu.
They almost seem like be a good favorite for a lot of Lovecraftian fans or like writers, to throw in. I seem to see them more than I do some of the others. Mm-hmm. You don't see the Migos used a lot. It's usually the ones.
Comparatively, as far as they're the go-to, as far as kind of your entry level.
Yeah, I guess they're more cinematic looking or something. It's a little hard to have giant crayfish, attacking people.
Well, as far particularly it's in terms of because you can introduce them so easily, as far as you're going to your small town fishing village or whatever, and hey, these people look kind of funny. And then progressing further from there, as opposed to some of the other ones require a little more introduction, and back there aren't as easy to, just kind of immerse yourself into, or as a stranger going into a small town.
Yeah. Anyway, I got some updates on some of the previous creatures we talked about. You may remember in episode 4, we discussed how to pronounce Cthulhu's name. I was listening to an interview of S.T. Josie, and he pronounced it in a very different way. He pronounced it Cthulhu. And he said it just as civilized like that, which sounds just a little too, un-Lovecraftian, say it like that, because Lovecraft wanted the first syllable be pronounced very guttural and very thick. So I think it should be more like Cthulhu, kind of like that. So
you're clearing your throat.
Can you say that again?
Cthulhu or Cthulhu. So that's our that's our different pronunciations of Cthulhu that we all come across. We all seem to go back to the standard when everybody says incorrectly, just because it just seems more natural to, I guess, to people.
You'd be mad if we
Wait.
were like be correcting everybody.
Yeah.
Wait, which one is incorrect?
Cthulhu is not the correct way to say it.
It's
Cthulhu.
not the preferred nomenclature.
Yeah.
Not the creator's preference.
Yeah. Cthulhu is how Josie says it. And
Right.
considering that, he's probably studied Lovecraft more than anyone else on this planet, he probably has more authority on how to pronounce it anyway. But when he's interviewed, he'll say that. And at the risk of angering Hester again, I'm going to talk about him one more time.
That didn't work out.
I know we're going.
There goes the show.
I'm going to cross my fingers. I just finished reading The Return of Hester by August Derleth, which appeared in the March 1939 edition of Weird Tales. This was Derleth's attempt at a sequel at Call of Cthulhu, and where efforts were made to return Hester to Earth, hence the name. Lovecraft never read the story, but he knew about it. Derleth wanted to include a line, "In his house of Beetlejuice, banished Hester awaits dreaming." Lovecraft advised him not to use Beetlejuice to represent a primal name for the distant sun, or to represent the name used by denizens of any of its hypothetical planets, since this name was an Arabic product of the Middle Ages. And since the word Beetlejuice is so holy and recognizably a terrestrial coinage with a known terrestrial etymology. As Lovecraft confided at Clark Ashton Smith about the story, in inventing the unknown, one must be careful not to contradict the known. Derleth does appear to have downplayed Beetlejuice in the story. I'm more curious about what Lovecraft would have thought of Hester and Cthulhu being half brothers. Derleth failed to mention who their common parent is. Clark Ashton Smith did read the story a few months after Lovecraft's death and found it unsatisfactory. He even suggested ways to improve the tale, such as creating a vague, menacing atmosphere and eerily growing tension around Hester, and make Haddon, the narrator, more of a skeptic until the accumulation of all the weird phenomena leaves him with no possible alternative. Derleth does not appear to have taken any of Smith's advice over that. And earlier we talked about the deep ones in video games, and David, you wanted to talk about some Lovecraft-themed computer games.
Well, way back in the day when I first got a PC and it had 2 megabytes of RAM, I had a few video games that I would play, and one of them was Alone in the Dark. This was around 1992. Really, I mean, if you you can look this up on any of there's an Alone in the Dark wiki. If you want to look it up, you can see screenshots, and basically everything is like shaded polygons. Everything is made out of these little triangular shapes. It's at the time it just seemed fantastic, and now it looks a little dated to say the least. But you have the choice of playing 2 different characters. You can be Edward Carnby or what's her name, Emily Hartwood. So it was had an equal opportunity adventure there for if you wanted to be a man or a woman. And basically you were exploring this haunted mansion, and you would encounter several creatures like ghouls, zombies. There's some night gaunts. I'd totally forgotten about that, and I ran across some screen captures of those. Surprisingly, they're not too bad for for the graphics capability that they had at the time. There were that was 1992, and then Alone in the Dark 2 came out in 93, and Alone in the Dark 3 came out in 1994. And they rebooted the series in 2001 with Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. And I think Mark had some information about a comic book prequel. And there's also actually a movie with Christian Slater, I believe, called Alone in the Dark that's based off of that 2001 game. So
yeah,
if you're interested in playing it, I think you can get a bundle from Steam with Alone in the Dark and several other of those games together. You cannot just purchase Alone in the Dark so far that I've found anywhere right now.
And now the first three Alone in the Darks took
That's
place in
where we are with
1920s,
that.
didn't they?
Questions, comments?
The first Alone in the Dark,
I
first three
believe
Alone in
so,
the Darks.
yes.
Yeah, I thought they did.
Yeah.
And then there were more modern settings for the other ones.
I read through some of the gameplay, and it's been obviously been 30 years since I played it. But some of the monsters that showed up, there is the one I'd forgotten about that's really pretty interesting is a Chthonian, which is some sort of a giant worm that lives underneath this house. And I don't know if they show up in Lovecraft or not, but that might be a creature to look into for a future episode.
A Chthonian. Do you know how to
Yes,
spell that?
Chthonian. Chthonian.
Okay. To look that one up. I did watch the movie that came out in 2005.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
It's playing on the Hoopla, and
Is it also set in the 20s, or is it a modern day setting?
it was a modern day, which really is what caused a lot of fans to be angered by the movie because it felt as such a radical departure. Because it was originally intended to be released with the same time as the video game that when they rebooted. But something happened with the video game and it got delayed, and so the movie got released first. And so it was such a radical departure, and that was probably one reason why people hated the movie. It had several strikes against it. It was directed by U.E. Boyle, who was regarded pretty much as the world's worst filmmaker. And it had Tara Reid in it, and she doesn't get like a high reputation with like a lot of fans either. And
I don't know. There's,
yeah,
she's all right.
Yeah, she got nominated for like a worst actress for that movie, and I didn't think she was that bad, to get like a worst actress award. It had a budget of 20 million and it only made 12.7 million. And it had such a reputation of being such a bad movie, that by the time I watched it, I'm kind of like watching, well, it's not that bad of a movie. It's not great, but it has a lot of problems. And,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I do enjoy seeing Christian Slater, and I do wish he was in better film projects.
Yeah, he sort of disappeared lately, other than Mr. Robot, I guess. That's the last thing I saw him in.
He himself and Mr. Robot, he's really good at that. But as far as movies, I'm trying to think of the last good movie that I'd seen him in. But yeah, a lot of people transition, into TV work and do a lot of good stuff in there. So
he does a lot of direct to DVD type stuff. So there are a lot of movies he'll appear in, kind of like some action film with like a really generic titles, stuff like that could star anybody, but they have him. And I did find a quote from the original screenwriter for the Blair Eckerson for Alone in the Dark, who was not happy with the changes that U.E. Boyle made into it. And his quotes go like, the original script took Alone in the Dark premise and depicted it as it was actually based on the true story of a private investigator in the northeastern U.S. whose missing person cases began to uncover a disturbing paranormal secret. It was told through the eyes of a writer following Edward Carnby and his co-worker for a novel, and depicted them as real-life blue-collar folks who never expected to find hideous beings waiting for them in the dark. We tried to stick as close to H.P. Lovecraft's style and the low-tech nature of the original game, always keeping the horror in the shadows, so you never see what was coming for them. Thankfully, Dr. Boyle was able to hire his loyal team of hacks and crank out something much better than our crappy story, and add in all sorts of terrifying horror movie essentials like opening gateways to alternative dimensions, bimbo blonde archaeologists, sex scenes, mad scientists, slimy dog monsters, special army forces designated to battle slimy CGI dog monsters, Tara Reid, Matrix slow motion gun battles and car chases. And oh yeah, and a 10-minute opening backstory scroll read aloud to the illiterate audience, the only people able to successfully miss all the negative reviews. I mean, hell, Boyle knows what a real scare lies. So
he really
he
just didn't hold anything back.
Yeah. Yeah, he was quite upset about it. But somehow the other, it got a sequel. And Christian Slater wasn't in the sequel. And from what I've read of it, I haven't seen it or anything, but it's supposed to be slightly better than the original. And it seemed they just completely ignored the first movie and just did something else. Because
Well,
there's not a lot of room but to go up, you know.
there's not a lot of video games that translate well into movies. Although Uwe Boll's kind of got has kind of made a career out of that because he did. I'm trying to think. He did video adaptation of Postal, another video game, adaptation of Blood Rain, another video game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's his bread and butter out there.
Yeah, that seems to be his thing. Was doing a lot of those movies based on video games, and he seems his reputation's gotten a little bit better. It seems like he's not quite as regarded as the world's worst filmmaker ever, but he's never going to be like considered Citizen Kane or anything like that.
He was going to fight in a boxing match with some critic that was slamming on his movies. I'm remembering that right.
Yeah, that was. He did challenge several of his critics to a boxing match, and I think he actually did fight one. And I think he beat him up, and so I bet that made him feel really good.
Some elderly guy that had been sitting behind a typewriter for years. Yeah, I'm sure that was a fair fight.
Yeah.
Training montage to fight Uwe Boll.
And Richard, did you want to talk about the comic book Die or anything?
It's in terms of there's a comic series out now from Image Comics called Die, with the double meaning being rolling a die in a role-playing game, and then obviously to actually die. About a group of characters like childhood friends who get sucked into the actual world of a RPG that they created together. But one of the hooks of it is that there are various influential people that show up throughout the course of this other world they created. Tolkien, H.G. Wells, who we were talking about earlier, another of other influential authors and that type of thing show up. And then the most recent issue, they're going into a Lovecraft theme because of the Call of Cthulhu RPG, as far as that's concerned, because he's kind of like hitting on various styles of RPGs or role-playing games and whatnot. So now they're just now getting into one where there's the deep ones. We're talking about an entry level. Very much, they start off, going to a fishing village, and there's some people with the Innsmouth look, and they're the deep ones, and that kind of clues them into the fact that we're going into the Lovecraft arc at this point. I wouldn't say it's a good jumping on point, like say for when we were talking about Miskatonic, being something you could start with an issue 1 on. You want to probably start at the beginning, because starting in issue 16, probably, unless you were just there to spot the Lovecraft references and that kind of thing. But as far as I figured they would kind of get into it at some point, particularly given the popularity of the Call of Cthulhu RPG series.
I guess you'd be hardcore and just read it cold, and
I'm only here for Lovecraft reference.
Yeah, make up your own backstory of what's going on.
I don't need to know what's actually happening.
Yeah, all that. Anyway, I'd going back to H.G. Wells. I saw in Canopy that had the Things to Come, which was directed by William Cameron Menzies and was based on one of Wells' novels, and he also wrote the screenplay for it. And Lovecraft saw this movie, and it was one of those movies where he was kind of like warning people about to stop our warlike nature and start embracing such concepts as science and all that. And to quote Lovecraft, I saw the movie version of Wells' Things to Come the other day and was tremendously impressed. Mere size is quite overpowering sometimes. Those incredible huge planes roaring through the clouds with 20th century ships buzzing infinitesimally as hornets against their wheels. Probably such monsters wouldn't fly, but they did produce a tremendous effect. And the scenes of warfare with little bat-winged planes swarming through the clouds so thickly that the air was black with them. I think I should remember for a long while the scenes in the city of the far future, panoramas so vast that the eyes couldn't take them all in. The towers of the windless buildings rising pure and sleek in the air, webbed with crystal spans for traffic. And through the bright air crowds of people in remotely Grecian robes moving over shining streets. You should see the picture if you have a chance. And I have to say that the things that he liked about the movie, I liked about the movie as well. I love the special effects for it. It had very practical effects as well. No CGI, so they built models, for these like giant ships in the cities and stuff like that. And I guess I have a special affinity for like when people actually build something, for their movie to have, for a special effect. So I was quite impressed by those little special effects he had, especially like some of the aerial battle scenes that they had, like the planes fighting against the gigantic planes from the future.
I need to watch it sometime. I've maybe seen bits and pieces of it, but I haven't seen the whole thing.
It's I recommend it. It's I could see Gene Roddenberry watching this and getting the ideas of doing Star Trek. This is kind of like how he felt, and it's really eerie watching it because this like was done before World War II started, and like when you see like London being invaded and bombed, it kind of like is really eerie, to see that, especially when like this is like almost like predicting the future. And so that was so I was quite impressed with that stuff. And there's another Lovecraft podcast out. It's actually been out since 2019, but it's called Voluminous, and it's the letters of H.P. Lovecraft, in which Andrew Lehman and Sean Branley discussed and read the letters of the author. It is estimated that he wrote 100,000 letters, roughly 15 a day in his adult life. And they range from one-page diaries to 70-page diatribes. And it's believed that only 20,000 of these letters survive today. And after he died, August Dorleff contacted as many people who had corresponded with the author and had the letters transcribed. And which I find quite impressive that him and his secretary just like transcribed all these letters. Dorleff was busy himself doing his own writing and other things, and I just don't know how he found time to do everything that he did. And but the letters were returned, and so these transcripts that we rely on. And to quote the podcast, in his letters, Lovecraft revealed an amazing breadth of knowledge in philosophy, science, history, and literature, art, and many other subjects, and forcibly asserts the high considered opinions and somewhat can be upsetting opinions. And that's putting it very mildly. It's like Lovecraft did vogue his views on a lot of things. Some things you just agree with, and other times it's going to break your heart, some of the things that he says. And but I was quite impressed because like some of these letters go on for quite some time. I mean, they could spend like an hour just reading one of the letters, and then they stop and and read it. I mean, talk about it. So I was so that I recommend that for anybody who's very interested in kind of getting to know more of the insight of Lovecraft. And while on the subject of his letters, there's another book of his missives coming out. These are going to be the letters to E. Hoffman Price and Richard F. Searight. And E. Hoffman Price was a fellow weird fiction writer. He had met Lovecraft in 1932 when he was visiting in New Orleans. And Price is the only person who has met in person the trinity of weird fiction, which includes also Clark Ashton Smith and Robert E. Howard. No one else can ever make that claim to fame. And Lovecraft and Price collaborate together on Through the Gates of the Silver Key. It's not mentioned in the blurs, but I'm curious to learn if they discussed race in their letters. Hoffman's story, The Infidel's Daughter, angered the Ku Klux Klan. And at one point in his life, Lovecraft saw the Klan as very important in preserving American civilization. It'd be curious to see if Hoffman had any positive influence on Lovecraft's xenophobia. And Richard Searight had sought out Lovecraft in 1933 to revive his stories and poems. Lovecraft did not revise anything by him, but they continued corresponding. These letters had been printed before in a booklet, but it's been out of print and very expensive to obtain. So I'm looking very forward to seeing that thing. Of all the other volumes of letters I picked up and still trying to read. They're not something you can just read on the beach and anything like that.
Yeah, some light reading.
Yeah, you got to be a certain frame of mind in order to to get to and read them all. During a random search, I discovered a few people are selling Lovecraftian themed perfumes and essential oils. And so there is like the H.P. Lovecraft Natural Perfume Oil. And one of the blurbs they give for it is, to echo H.P. Lovecraft's traditional upbringing, this perfume oil layers classic notes of cedar and patchouli, A balance of lime, black peppercorn, salty ocean air rise from the basic notes of the chant of an elder god, evoking the darker and more mysterious elements of both the author's personality and the worlds he penned. I don't normally think of Lovecraft like that, but And there was one customer response says, like, I bought this from my sister and she loves everything H.P. Lovecraft. She said it smells like frankincense and she loves it. And then there's the Black Phoenix Alchemy, and they sell Al Azareth, Mispatonic University, Cthulhu, and Narcoleptotep brands of essential oils. And there's another company called Lovecraft Therapy Sky Aromatherapy Oil. And I get a sense this company is unaware of the author, and they just happen to use that name because it sounded clever to them. Some like, a variation of witchcraft.
Yeah, like the people peddling this products or whatever like that. But I'm like, are you aware of the movie of the same name?
Yeah. And there's some beard oil, Cthulhu beard oil by Humphreys Handmade. It's seawater citrus, but they also have the Kraken beard oil, 99 millimeter beard oil, Buffalo Bill beard oil, Buffalo Bill from the Silence of the Lambs. And I get a feeling that this is basically the same product, but they just slap different labels on it and maybe have a little something.
Or at least in the Jonathan Demme one, I don't know as far as things.
Yeah.
I wonder how they can use Buffalo Bill. They must be licensing that. I can see them getting by with Lovecraft beard oil, but I don't know. Would Thomas Harris allow that?
Well, the name Buffalo Bill, you could like say it's anything. You could say something about me.
Yeah, as far as you know.
But obviously, you think it's Buffalo Bill from the Silence of the Lambs. So are they touting it as that, or are they saying it's Buffalo Bill with the gun?
Consumer.
Their label has a very Silence of the Lamb look to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. But Buffalo Bill. Plus, I don't know if even trademark. He may not have even trademarked Buffalo Bill. So they can. He can get around that. Plus, Buffalo Bill's historical name.
Yeah.
So you can. There are ways to get around stuff like that. And there's a second Cthulhu beard oil. It's done by the Infernal Beard Company. And the materials they have in theirs is rosewood, black pepper, and rosemary, cedarwood, and sweet almond. And then you have the Devil's Mark Cthulhu Beard Balm. And it's coffee and chocolate. And they're proudly made in the USA.
None of these scents and flavors sound very infernal or eldritch to me. Relatively.
It needs to be like Wolf's Bane or
some
Nightshade. I don't know.
Or like if you're going to have like deep ones, you have like a deep one like this, aroma, have a fish smell or something like that, or a frog smell.
Some type of exotic sea salt or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Salmon oil.
Or like something smells like brimstone.
There you
go. Anything like that. And if
that's
you don't
how I want to smell all day.
Yeah.
I just dug myself out of a hell pit.
Yeah. But if you don't have a beard, you can buy an inflatable Cthulhu beard. So
what's an inflatable beard?
Yes, an inflatable beard has like the little tentacles at the bottom, kind of like Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Does it wave? Is it when you say it's inflatable as far as it flap around like those kind of ones you see at the used car lots?
I'm sure if you like moved your head around, it might move, wave and stuff like that. But it's just like something like you blow into it. It's kind of like one of those old inflatable like toys you used to have when you're little. It's like it doesn't have much, if maybe it caught a really good windstorm or something, might move. But it didn't look like you do very much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you never know what you're going to learn here on this program. And I picked up another comic. It was called The Adventures of Cthulhu Jr. and Dashley Dirk. And this was a Halloween Comic Fest from 2019. And Dashley Dirk is a wannabe supervillain who is informed he needs to capture the son of Cthulhu to achieve his lifelong dream of being admitted into the League of Evil. And evil is an acronym for every villain in literature. And according to the blurb, hilarity and hijinks ensure in this genuinely all ages comic when a bumbling bad guy discovers Cthulhu Jr. has moved in next door. And they just had that one issue. They never did any more. Though a original graphic novel is supposed to be coming out in the fall of 2021. And the writer of this was Dirk Manning. And some of his writing credits include doing a comic for the Twisted band. If you all remember, they're kind of like the one of those Slipknot knockoffs and stuff like that, or offshoots. And he seems to join doing tales of characters who have names for that can be puns, like Mr. Ree or Terra Normal. Some of his more higher profile stuff is like with Mercy Spark, the Grimm Fairy Tales through Xenoscope. He wrote a foreword for Bomb Queen, Time Bomb graphic novel. And he even wrote a letter to Walking Dead number 46, which for some reason he decided to put in his writing credits.
Be comprehensive.
Yes.
And everything.
Yeah. And Scoot McMahon is the artist, and his credits are Sammy the Samurai Squirrel and a wrapped up Kid Mummy series. Yes. And that's that. And I did see there's a someone else is trying to do another comic book with Cthulhu in it, and this one he's going to be fighting against Uncle Sam. And the blurb for that one is, when cultists attempt to summon Cthulhu during World War II, only Uncle Sam can save the world. And this is on Kickstarter right now. And from the reactions I've gotten from other people, they're not supportive of this project at all. They don't seem too crazy about it. And we got a response back from Ron Whitehead. I made a mention about him in the last episode about like his use of a Lovecraftian word. And I'm going to try my best to kind of capture his energetic energy as he responded back to this. One Cyclopean peering down into a midnight bottom of his outhouse. Thank you. I love it. Fantastic program. Oh, great work. Thanks, Mark. And Ron Whitehead has just been named the U.S. National Beat Poet Laureate for 2021-22 by the National Beat Poet Foundation. So congratulations to him. And do y'all have anything else y'all want to talk about?
I guess as far as for a future, thing in terms of, I think we were talking about Alone in the Dark, how much maybe that's as far as spawned, an influence of Lovecraft in, the next 3 decades worth of video games. Because as far as there's just, particularly within the last 5 or 10 years, there's just an explosion of various, like Lovecraft themed, like video games. As far as that goes, we could do a whole episode on, a deep dive into that as far as that's concerned.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it's endless. That could be like another spin-off as well. We not only do the music, but we're going to do the video games as well.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Dave and Richard, I see the stars are no longer right. We must cease all discussions until next month when they align again. 30 Minutes of H.P. Lovecraft is sponsored by the Cthulhu Nose Hairs Oils. This podcast was created in association with the LovecraftPod.com and the Logan Speculative Fiction Group with help from Logan County Public Library, the Lovecraft Eternal Facebook page, and the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, and the Great Old Ones. Special thanks to Katie Tyson for her technomancy and Joshua Dukes for his suspense worry. You can listen to past episodes at anchor.fm/LCPL. Anchor.fm/LCPL. You can reach us at mark@lovecraftpod.com, richard@lovecraftpod.com, or david@lovecraftpod.com. And to meet again, may you avoid the wrath of Princess Cthulhu and her offer to watch Alone in the Dark.